please.
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 18th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First is to review and approve our agenda for this evening. Can I have a motion? Erica, second. Bob, all in favor? Right. Moving on to the approval of minutes from the April 4th meeting. Is there a motion? Penny, second. Hugo, all in favor? Okay, moving on. Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. Is there anyone here wishing to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on. And we'll dive right into our agenda topic tonight under reports and recognition. We have a special education program update, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Bill Tesper, Assistant Superintendent, to kick it off.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about all the wonderful things we're doing across the district in special education. My goals tonight are to connect what we talked about at our last Board of Ed meeting around RTI that Dr. Carenti presented, connect to that RTI process to the special education process, review the services and programming across the district that we have to offer in special education, present a couple of snapshots of some data across the district in terms of students and disabilities and categories of identification, and finally look to the future at some of the trends that we are seeing in special education and some of the initiatives that we have in play here in the district. But before I do that, I would be remiss if I didn't point out our three special ed administrators sitting in a crowd of people. The work that they have done over the last 2 years during this pandemic has been exemplary. They have been dedicated and conscientious and working at all hours of day and night to make sure that the students of New Canaan who were identified for special education had all the needs and services met throughout the last 2 years. We couldn't have done it without their leadership as a district. At the high school, I'll introduce them specifically at the high school, overseeing the program there at the high school, the downtown campus, as well as the launch program is Kevin Ryan. The special ed administrator for SACS Middle School is Vanessa Visners. And then for the preschool and elementary schools is Bob Rousseau. They are truly the top of their game here in the field. So we are so fortunate to have such high caliber administrators here in the district. So, to begin, I'd like to just remind us or reflect on the fact that everything we do in special education is governed by law. And there are three primary laws that govern how we approach special education. The first being the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and that is the primary law that governs what we do. But then we are also guided by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and then also the court decisions and hearing decisions that take place in the state of Connecticut and in the area. And you'll remember when I did the orientation for the new members, I brought up the hearing decision of AR versus the Connecticut State Board of Education as an example of a hearing decision where a family brought the state of Connecticut to a due process hearing, and the decision was made by the hearing officer that eligibility in Connecticut would extend up to age 22. So now all districts in Connecticut are bound by that decision. So those are the three areas where are the three laws that govern special education throughout the state and the district for sure. If you recall at the last meeting, Dr. Carenti talked about the RTI process and the importance of having high quality instruction in the general education arena, making sure that we provide scientifically research-based instruction for students in the general education setting. And we talked about the fact that the RTI process is not exclusive of the special education process. A student can be in RTI and still be referred to special education. A student can be referred to special education before they even enter the RTI process And certainly a student can be referred to special education at the end of the RTI process. So in essence, the RTI process doesn't preclude a student from being referred to special education. The two can happen simultaneously. A referral from or to special education can happen from a variety of different sources. In essence, any individual with knowledge of the student can refer them to special education. So most commonly we see a teacher referring a student, an administrator, parents, certainly are a source of referrals, physicians. The pediatrician can say to a parent, I think you might want to refer or look at your school system for its services in special education because of X, Y, or Z. We've even had cases where a student may self-refer to special education if they're old enough. It's a rare occurrence, but I've seen it happen in my career. Once the referral is made to special education, there is a PPT scheduled, or a planning and placement team meeting. At that meeting, there's an administrator, special ed teacher, regular ed teacher present, school psychologist, and any other related services that are appropriate based on the reason for the referral. If the referral states some concerns with fine motor skills, then we would invite an OT to the meeting. At that meeting, the team would review the referral, decide whether or not they wanted to go forward with an evaluation. If an evaluation was warranted, they would design that evaluation, obtain parental consent for the evaluation, and then over the course of the next several weeks, the evaluation would be conducted by the appropriate evaluators, the special ed teacher, speech and language, or a psychologist. Once the evaluation was completed, and if I'm going too quickly, just let me know, or if I use acronyms and you don't know what they are, because that's my default mode, let me know. I know that we're under some time pressure to beat the storm and get this done. Once the evaluation is completed, the team gets back together to review it and determine eligibility. And this is, when looking at the eligibility, this is where the RTI will come back into play for students who are looking at for learning disabilities around reading or math. And if you recall, if you recall at our discussion, will this work then? At the last meeting, we talked about, or I mentioned the fact that there's a worksheet that we need. Oh, we don't have it. You don't see it. Sorry. There's a worksheet that we need to go through in order to identify a student as having a learning disability. This is the one area where we need to make sure that we have gone through the RTI process. So the team will sit around, and if we're considering identifying a student with a learning disability, the team will sit and go through this checklist, this worksheet, to make sure that what we have done in the general education arena is providing that high-quality, scientifically research-based intervention in the classroom by the classroom teacher, a Tier 1 intervention. So we check that box and say, yes, the student has had that. They've gone through that part of the RTI process. And have they gone through small group differentiated instruction? Yes, they've done that. So we check that box. We explain on the sheet that we actually have to fill out what we've done in small groups. How has the teacher differentiated the instruction for the student? Progress monitoring. Are they making progress with that RTI, that instruction in RTI? What are the assessments we're using to determine whether or not the student is making progress? If they're not making progress, we move to that Tier 2 level of RTI instruction. Again, still within the general ed arena. So Tier 2 and Tier 3, what supplemental scientific research-based instruction are we providing to the student? This is where the reading specialist may get involved, and still a general education process. But as a PPT decision, before we identify a student as having a learning disability, we need to make sure that we've done everything possible in the general ed arena before we go down this road and say a student has a learning disability. And they go through, what have you done in terms of decoding to address the weakness if it's in decoding or fluency or comprehension? So we have to document all of the interventions that we've done, that the regular ed team has done throughout the process. And then at the end, number 5 there says lack of sufficient progress to meet age or state approved or appropriate grade level standards. if we check that box and say, yes, the student is not making sufficient progress, what's all the evidence we have that supports that? And then we can say, okay, we've put this student through a process of scientifically based, systematic instruction, and they're still not making the progress we want to see. Well, now we can say, okay, this isn't about a gap in instruction or the not high quality instruction. This is a student who truly has a learning disability. And then we can go ahead and say, okay, we're going to identify you with a learning disability in reading or a learning disability. There's a worksheet for math as well. And you can see at the very bottom that the teacher signs it, and so does the administrator. So it's not something that we take lightly. Diagnosing a student with a disability is a significant decision to make, and if it's appropriate, by all means, we'll make the decision and we'll do that. But it's not something that we just step in lightly. There's a process that we need to go through for the benefit of the student. And now you're going to have to help me get back. You'd think that these progressive lenses would help, but not so much. Take a sip of water while you do that. Perfect. Thank you. So determining eligibility, if it's a learning disability, they'll go through that worksheet right there. If a student is being evaluated for something like autism or attention deficit disorder, RTI process is not a factor. There's no RTI for autism or attention deficit disorder. The RTI process is focused around the learning disability category. Once a student is identified, we develop a series of goals and objectives to address their concerns that came out through the evaluation process and feedback from parents and teachers. And then we look at designing a specialized program. What instruction does the student need in order to make progress in the areas that are of concern, whether it's decoding or organizational skills? We develop goals and objectives in those areas. And when we do that, we always look for the LRE, or the least restrictive environment continuum. So we want to make sure that we're providing the services for students to the greatest extent possible in the general education arena. And I'll put a graphic up there for that in a second. But we have, from the time that a student is referred to special education to the time that we implement the program, is 45 school days. It may sound like a lot, but it goes by very quickly when you're trying to go through scheduling the PPT, doing the evaluation process. And technically, we need to have it done 30 school days, because once we have the PPT, there's 5 days for us to get the IEP out, and then the parents or the family has 10 days to look at it and decide whether or not they want to accept it. So it's really a very short window to try and to get this process done. Oh, sorry, I'm clicking like I'm on a computer. Least restrictive environment is a continuum. It's what is the right environment for a student that keeps them in the general education as much as possible. The vast majority of our students are from resource room and down. Most of our students get their services either in the general education setting, or they're pulled out to a resource room model where they might get specialized instruction in reading, math, executive functioning skills, note-taking, or whatever the area of deficit is. They would get special ed instruction in a resource room and then return to the general education setting. There are very few students across the district who spend their days primarily in a separate setting, and of course we have students who are placed out of district who need a highly specialized program that we're not able to provide here in district. Once a year we have a PPT to monitor progress. So we convene the team together, we talk about progress on goals and objectives, and then we devise new goals and objectives. Program services are adjusted as needed. A student may no longer need OT work because they can hold a pencil correctly, or their fine motor skills have improved because they've been working with OT for a year or two, and now they no longer need that service, so we can exit them from that service. Every 3 years, we're required to do a triennial evaluation where we reassess the student to determine, 1, continued eligibility for special education services, and 2, what progress is the student making. So in addition to the yearly progress on goals, we need to reevaluate the student every 3 years to get a sense of progress on standardized assessments as well as on goals and objectives. A student is exited from special education when they no longer require services to access the general education and make progress in the general education curriculum. Across the district, We have a variety of services that we provide for students depending on their need. The services are individualized or tailored to the student. So at that PPT, the team may decide that a student requires just special ed services in the area of math, and that's all that student gets. Another student may get special education instruction, speech and language, and work with the psychologist once a week. Someone else may get all of the above, D. So it varies on the students, and it's based on their individual need. And it may change over time, like I said. So these services are available to all students across the district based on that individual need. But in addition to this, we have some specialized programming across the district for students who would be considered more complex learners, more involved students, and have a greater level of need. I'll spend a few minutes talking about each one of those programs as we go through. The first is the preschool program. And the preschool program is an integrated program which has special education students as well as typically developing peers in there with mutual benefit to both types of students. It's a program that's mandated by law. The students are referred to the preschool either through the Birth to 3 program, that's another program mandated by law, or parent referral. Oftentimes we'll see referrals coming through physicians to parents to us, especially first-time parents who may not really be aware of milestones or what's going on with their child. The physician may say, you might want to contact your school. I see some concerns about X, Y, or Z, and then we'll get a referral that way. We are required to maintain as much as possible a 50-50 or greater ratio of typical peers to special education students. We currently have 2 classes of 3-year-olds and 2 classes of 4-year-olds. We usually start the year out with lower numbers in 3-year-olds because when we do programming for the 3-year-old students or class, we're required to provide services when the student turns 3. So no matter when during the year a student turns 3, they need to come into our class if they go through the evaluation process and are eligible for special education. We have to take them on. So we generally start with fewer students in the 3-year-old program at the start of the year, and it grows as we go throughout the year. We also have itinerant students who come in for speech and language services only, or OT services only, or PT services only. They may come in twice a week for 30 minutes. For speech and language, it's usually around articulation. They're working on a particular sound or group or class of sounds. They come in 20 or 30 minutes a week, twice a week, and get the services and then go home. They don't stay for the full day of preschool. The focus of preschool is certainly those early literacy skills, language skills, social skills, behavioral skills, all taught through play, structured play, and other structured activities throughout the day for students in the preschool. And they are certainly afforded or they receive the related services that they need to based on their IEPs in the preschool program. From preschool, those students will enter into those elementary schools across the district, and we have complex learner programs at each of the 3 elementary schools. And again, the focus there, those early literacy skills and numeracy skills, but these are also students who really need some time to learn those basic routines that other students may pick up on really quickly. These students, it takes a lot of repetition and practice to do the morning routine, mealtime. What does it mean for lunch, and how do I go to the cafeteria? Or is the cafeteria too busy for me and I need to eat someplace else with some other peers? And following directions are all skills that are intensely focused on for these students in the preschool, in the elementary schools. Related services certainly are in place for the students at the elementary level, depending on their need. They are included as much as possible. As I said before, it's always that LRE continuum. We want to include those students in the general education as much as possible. Some students may spend 80% of their day with their general ed peers. Some spend 50% of their day. Again, it's individualized based on the need of the student. We also use ABA or Applied Behavioral Analysis at the elementary level for some skill acquisition. And in essence, what ABA is taking a task that you want a student to accomplish, whether it's packing up their backpack to go home or washing their hands, and taking that skill, breaking it down into the individual component tasks or parts that are required to do the skill, and developing a plan to teach them each of those individual parts, and then chaining those behaviors until they can do the task in completion. It can be a slow process for some students. Others can pick up on it much more quickly. We also have, through our assistive technology, working with speech and language pathologists throughout the district, augmentative and alternative communication. So for students who can't communicate verbally, use language or speak, we have other means of communication for them to begin to communicate with peers and family as well. At SACS, when the students reach SACS, we have the Access program, which again is an individualized experience or educational experience for the students. We're constantly at those meetings every year at a PPT determining what a student needs for the next year and changing that based on their needs and as they grow and develop and change. Students here will divide their time between general education and special education classrooms as well. Related services are in place for those students that need them. One of the shifts that we start to see, a more intense shift at SACS, is work on ADLs, whether they're the personal activities of daily living or the instrumental activities of daily living. We start to really focus on those skills for some of those students. So in terms of personal skills, feeding and dressing are activities of daily living that students will need specialized instruction in. The instrumental activities, it may be meal prep or meal cleanup, or how do I get from this classroom to this classroom in the school? How do I plan that out and get from point A to point B? So we can start to work on those skills to increase their independence as much as possible. We're fortunate through the grant money that we've received over the course of the last couple of years to set aside some of that money to renovate one of the classrooms at SACS, a little corner of the classroom. We're going to put an L-shaped kitchen in there. There's already a sink there, so we're going to put a refrigerator and a stove and a dishwasher and a microwave and a washer and a dryer so that we can begin to target some of those functional skills, those activities of daily living for some of these students. Previously, we really have only been able to focus on those skills once they get to the high school because there's a kitchen at the high school that we use. So we're going to expand the ability to work with these students on these skills at an earlier age, which is a great opportunity for them. And then one of the other things that we start to see at SACS is having students go out into the community to experience community activities, learn the skills that they'll need to be successful in those experiences in the community. At the high school, life skills program, here we start to see a shift of academics into functional academics. What do the students need to be able to do to function on a day-to-day basis? So math for some of these kids is now going to be focused on money. And what does money mean? What's the value of money, which is an incredibly abstract concept and something very difficult for students to understand. But we work on it, and we have strategies and ways to do it, and we continue to develop those skills in students. The other part with the money is going into a store and knowing how to pay for something. So how much money do I give if it costs $10.27? What bills do I give? How much change should I get back? Is it the appropriate amount of change? So it becomes very functional in nature, time as well. Written communication becomes, text messages and emails so I can communicate with my parents or my peers, what are you doing, or I'll be home at this time, or whatever the situation is. Very functional in nature. Same with reading, following the directions on the back of a box to microwave popcorn or something. I don't know. Read those functional directions become an important part of the reading, as well as I'm standing in front of an ATM. Can I read the prompts that tell me what to do because I know I'm going to take money out of the ATM? So that, in terms of reading, functional, day-to-day activities. Continue working on the ADLs here as well. Communication skills, assistive technology will play a big role for these students. And here at the high school, community experiences really, really begin to take center stage. Whereas at SACS, the kids might go out once every couple weeks or so, maybe twice in 2 weeks or so, once a week, depending on what's available and scheduling. At the high school, these kids are out virtually every day in the community doing something. They're working on practicing those functional skills on a day-to-day basis. So they're going out and they're going grocery shopping and working on the money, and they're working on the language and communication skills when they talk to the cashier and so forth. We're also working on developing those pre-vocational skills, where we're looking at, categorizing and following directions and being able to maintain time on task. And we have set up, the team there has done a great job of setting up some vocational opportunities or pre-vocational opportunities at the high school. The Ramazan, I'm not sure if there's copyright infringement there, but we'll let it go. Ramazan, which is a school store. That the life skills program has taken over the school store. But again, they do the inventory. They make a list of what they need. They go to Costco. They buy what they need to do. They work on the money. Then they come back and they work in the store. And it's that social interaction, the language skills, the communication with the other peers that are coming to the store to buy Twizzlers or Pop-Tarts or whatever there is. We're not going to get apples and bananas, sorry. And then the other benefit of that is we'll use the money that they make at the school store, and we're able to provide, Super Troopers, which is the mounted troops here in town. And we use that money to support the Super Troopers program, where they go out and they work with the horses and the stables and so forth. So it's a great program overall, looking at vocational skills. Launch program, 18 to 22 years old. Again, mandated by law, up till the day before their 22nd birthday, so a student can age out on February 2nd in the middle of a school year. It's a community-based transition program. The focus there is post-secondary education, vocational skills training, and again, independent living skills. You'll see that pop up a lot. That's a huge hurdle for students. In terms of post-secondary education, it can vary from students participating in a Safe Serve certification program, where they are certified in food safety, and then now they're more marketable to go work in a diner or a restaurant because they're certified as food safety. And they can go and work and do silverware and do whatever else they might do in the restaurant, which is an awesome skill. We've had students who take courses at NCC, students with high-functioning autism, take a course at NCC or two. In fact, several years ago, we had a student who went through NCC, got a 2-year degree, and then went on to UConn and got a 4-year degree, which was awesome. It was a great experience for the student. Vocational skills, they're out in internships daily. And you'll see the list there of some of the different settings for internships. It's not exhaustive. There are many internships. They're based on student interest and skill level. But the focus is really getting them out in the community and developing those job skills so that in the end, when they're done at 22, they have the skills they need to be competitively employed or employed with a job coach or whatever their skill level is. But our goal throughout this whole program from pre-K through launch is to increase their skills, independence, and later their vocational skills so that they can be as independent as possible in the community. The last program I wanted to talk about is the downtown campus. All the other programs and the discussion I've talked about so far has been about programming and special education. The downtown campus is not a special education program. It's a general education program that is open to all students, special education and regular education students. It was established 3 years ago. We're in our 4th year of the downtown campus. Student profile, grades 9 through 12, though most students will be in grades 10 through 12. We'd like to have students, unless it's a one-off case, we'd like to have students start here at the high school before the decision is made to have them go to the downtown campus. It's not exclusive, saying there's no freshmen, but we try and make sure that they get a shot here to be successful. In terms of student profile, again, social emotional concerns or mental health concerns around anxiety, depression. Oftentimes, students will be school avoidant, and they need a smaller setting, or we need to transition them back into school because they've stopped coming to school for one reason or another. Some students just need a smaller setting. That this high school is too big for them, it's too overwhelming, they need a smaller setting. It could be a general education student, it could be a special education student. Right now at the downtown campus, we have 15 students, and it is a 50-50 split just about of special ed and general ed, which is great, which is perfect. Sometimes a student been in a hospital for an extended period of time for one reason or another. It could be mental health concerns, and the treatment team there at the hospital is not recommending that they go back to a large setting like the high school, and we have the downtown campus for them to go and get therapeutic support and get the instruction that they need academically, along with the therapeutic support that the student may need. And then there are students who, for one reason or another, are lacking credits, and we can generally speed up some credit recovery because of the scheduling down there for students. Staffing is as it's outlined there. The general ed teacher usually varies between a 1.0 and a 1.2, depending on whether or not we have the need to offer a world language down there or an extra elective down there at the downtown campus. And the last thing I'll say about the downtown campus is that a lot of the instruction there is project-based. You know, a history teacher or a math teacher or a science teacher is coming into that environment, and they've got 9 through 12 or 10 through 12. They can't just come in and teach U.S. history to all the class, to all the kids, because some of them already had U.S. history, or some of them are economics, or they're in global history, so they can't just come in and teach a class. They have to kind of look at it from a project-based approach. So, you know, an example of that, you know, certainly could be what's going on in the Ukraine now. So the history teacher can come in, and he's got a couple kids in global history, he's got a couple kids in U.S. history, he's got somebody in economics, somebody else in psychology, whatever it might be. And they'll talk about what's going on in the Ukraine. And this group of kids in global history will look at it from the global perspective. What's the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, and what's their history, and has Russia done this before, and you know, on and on and on. The U.S. perspective, you know, have we been involved in these skirmishes before in Europe, and what's that look like, and what can we send troops there, or whatever the questions or the issues that they want to talk about and raise. And the economics, you know, student may be looking at, you know, is it really is the gas hike because of this war, or were there other things going on previously that contributed to it, and this is only a small piece of it? What about inflation, and so forth and so on? So they all kind of look at this from their own perspectives, depending on the course that they're in, and then the teacher brings them together, and they share their ideas and their concepts, and they talk about it and come up with some sort of a culminating discussion or project or product that they can use, you know, as an example of their learning. So it's an awesome opportunity. The teachers enjoy, you know, approaching it that way because it's something fresh and different for them. I wanted to talk briefly about some trends in special education that we're seeing here in the district and across the state and country, in fact, in some cases. You know, certainly we've talked throughout the budget process about the trend of visually impaired students here in the district, which is why the TVI is in the budget. We've posted for the position. We're hopeful to get some strong candidates that we'll be able to interview in the next, you know, several weeks. You know, the prevalence rate has increased across the state, across our DERG, and somewhat here in New Canaan, and I'll show you some numbers in a little bit on that. The complexity of students has certainly increased. You know, we're seeing a lot more complexity in the students, you know, multiple things at play at once, you know, requiring a lot of support for some students. And certainly, you know, students with significant mental health concerns. This was a trend before the pandemic. You know, it was one of the reasons that we started to look at this downtown campus, were the students who were struggling with mental health issues. You know, and the pandemic has certainly exacerbated that. We're seeing a significant number of students across, you know, the state, the DERG, in district with, you know, some significant mental health concerns. And then you know, technology is also a trend. It's been in place for, you know, several years now, probably 10 to 12 years. But the revolutions that we have seen, or the revolution in technology that we have seen over the last 10 to 12 years, has completely changed how we can work with students. You know, from you know, I guess I go back to, and Brian, maybe you can correct me, but I think it was 2010 when the first iPad, somewhere in that ballpark, ish, somewhere in that ballpark. But what that has done for us, that technology has been unbelievable. You know, now we can use VR and put a student with multiple disabilities or autism and have them, you know, do a real world experience through virtual reality before they go out and do it on the street or, you know, whatever. It's just a huge, it's just unbelievable. Text to speech and speech to text. When I first started, you know, years ago, we had Dragon Naturally Speaking, you know, for kids who had difficulty with writing, and it never worked. they gave up on it within, a week of trying to train it to listen to their voice and understand how they spoke and so forth and so on. And now think about how easy it is to dictate a text. You can dictate the text, watch it think to correct the word that it thinks that it should be there. It's amazing. So kids now it's so much easier for them to dictate a paper instead of handwriting if that's a problem, or instead of typing if that's a problem for them. They can just dictate it. Voice recognition in a house. Alexa, turn off the lights. Alexa, turn on the TV, whatever, right? Because there are students who have difficulty with mobility. They can't get up. They can't do those things that you and I might take for granted, but now they can with this technology. You saw Kebby the robot at our event earlier this year, and that's having great success, with students at the elementary level and autism. And then, augmentative and alternative communication. You see that's an iPad there in a carrying case. But the communication board there that I want to play, and then the kid can point to whatever they want and press it, and it'll say it. And it's the first time where a student, a kid, can communicate to their parents clearly what they want to do. I want to go outside, or I want to go play, or I want to do whatever. I mean, it's just that technology is just huge. It's amazing what we've seen in the last 10 years. Then lastly, I'll just touch that the Innovation Center with the hands-on, opportunities will be a huge benefit to students with disabilities. That is often where they shine. If you talk to Vivian Birdsall, the stuff that she does with her hands-on work has been amazing for special ed students. So with the expansion and the creation of the Innovation Center, that'll be fantastic for students in special ed. District data, students with IEPs, going back 5 years, you see, an increase for us over time a little bit. You see a bigger increase from 2018 to 2019. That increase was, the vast majority of that increase came from people moving into town with IEPs. I went back, because when I put this graph together, I went back to look at my notes and my information. And there were over 30 students who moved into town that year with IEPs. So it was an amazing jump that year. We pretty steady for 1920 for us. The start of this year, we were down a little bit. But as you'll see, current as of April 1st, we're up to 527 students. That's not a surprise to me. We have seen an increase in students coming through the preschool, where previously parents may have been holding their kids out and not sending them to the preschool, but we're seeing an increase in referrals to the preschool. And then certainly we're seeing an increase in the students with mental health concerns. One of the reasons we kept a pretty consistent prevalence rate, and I'll flip to the next slide in a second to show you. We really, when we got into this pandemic and we started to realize where we were and what was going on, we made a conscious effort as a special education team to look at a student who may be referred to special education because of a mental health concern. Are they depressed? Are they, anxious, or what's going on? Or looking at students who may have gaps in their learning. And we wanted to make sure that those were not situational issues. So a student may be depressed or be anxious because of the pandemic. Were they like that before the pandemic? Do we anticipate that they're not going to be that way once the pandemic is over and life is back to normal for them? We didn't want to identify those students as having a disability if it was situational. So we really kind of thought that through and how we approached, identifying students. The trick is, when does the anxiety or the depression shift from situational to something more long-term as we kind of go through this? And that's something that the team works together with parents and outside counselors and so forth and so on. But I think that approach really kind of, it helped us more accurately identify students who truly needed special education, as opposed to a student who may be suffering from situational, either a gap in learning because of instruction or a mental health concern. Prevalence rate, New Canaan versus the state. You can see the state, a pretty steady increase in the prevalence rate over time. Us less so, but we kind of plateaued there in 1920 and stayed 12.3, 12.1, 12.2. Currently, we're at 12.4, based on 4.1, I think is the date for the data. I anticipate that going up, as we continue to go through this. We're still are, mental health concerns, other issues. I don't anticipate a huge jump, but I, certainly would expect to see that number increase a little bit throughout the rest of this year and into next year. DERG prevalence rates versus New Canaan. I figured I would kind of let this slide narrate itself. Yeah, we certainly compare favorably to the prevalence rate. The classifications of students. These are the different categories that a student can be identified under in terms of special education. These percentages that we have here are pretty consistent across the state and the DERG, so the percentages are pretty consistent. Where we've seen the increases would be in the emotional disturbance at 2%. It's a small number, but we've seen an increase there because of the mental health concerns. That also shows up in other health impaired. Sometimes students, when they're identified for special education and there's a concern around anxiety or depression that's impacting them, it's other health impaired for anxiety or other health impaired for depression. And then the visual impairment that we've talked about, I know it says less than 10%, but when you start from 0, it's an increase, which we did. Initiatives in special education across the state and here in the district. I put in one of the Friday updates a few weeks ago, or a month or so, maybe 2 months or so ago, that the state of Connecticut has been working over the last 2 years to create a new IEP and data collection system. It is set to be implemented on July 1st of this year. A large group of teachers have participated in an IEP quality training session or program from January to March. There were 8 sessions, 90 minutes each. Based on the point or the goal of the training was to work with teachers to develop quality IEPs using standards-based goals. There's another training in our future for 15 of our staff members this summer. We've been allotted only 15 slots. The state allotted a certain number of slots based on the size of your district. And these are going to be staff members who are trained in actually how to use the system itself. So how to use the CT SED system, which we haven't seen. The only districts that have seen it are the pilot districts. So we really haven't seen it. So they'll go and get trained this summer. It's a half a day of training. And then we will use some time on the PL days before school starts to train the rest of the staff on how to use this system. One feature that is of benefit to parents is it'll have a parent portal where they can go in and see finalized IEPs. We can share documents that they need to sign, consent for testing or consent for initial placement in special education. They can sign it through the system, so we don't have to PDF it and send it to them or whatever the case may be. And we, the special education administrators and myself, will do a parent coffee on May 18th where we'll kind of talk about, or we will talk about the IEP system that's in place and share some information about the programming. And talk to some parents who are transitioning maybe from the elementary to SACS and SACS to the high school to make sure they have a good understanding of the programming that's available to them. The other 2 initiatives would be the Literacy Academy, which we've talked about through this budget process. Again, those positions have been posted for following the approval of the budget. Our fellow continues to do her training. She'll continue next year and be a full-fledged fellow. Little alliteration. As Dr. Lutzy, the English teacher, will appreciate. At the end of next school year. And we'll bring in Dr. Gillis to work with us and consult and bounce ideas off on how we're going to structure the program at the 3 elementary schools. The other training for those of you who have been on the board for a while that we started 2 years ago, we're finishing up this year, was the DBT training, or the dialectical behavioral therapy training. We have trained clinical staff across the district in this approach to working with students to develop interpersonal relationship skills and emotional regulation. The best way to think about this is Dr. Bliss came a couple meetings ago and talked about EI and ruler. emotional intelligence and the ruler work is back to the tie-in Dr. Correnti's RTI. It's a tier 1 intervention, ruler and emotional intelligence through the ruler program. There are students who need more than just that tier 1 level of intervention around, emotional intelligence and behavior regulation, interpersonal skills. And this is what DBT does. It provides the clinical staff the skills to work with students on those emotional intelligence skills that we talk about when we talk about ruler and emotional regulation. So we finish up the second year of that training this year, and we will be doing ongoing consultation with outside experts I think it's monthly at this point, where they come in, they talk about cases and brainstorm ideas and move forward with plans to work with students to improve their skill set. I wanted to wrap up by talking about outcomes for special ed students here in New Canaan. You can see that the student who goes through the typical high school experience here, if you look at the SAT scores, compared to the state average, the special education students in New Canaan are doing very well. Those scores are significantly above the state average for all students. It's great to see. It's a testament to the general education instruction that they're exposed to, because again, that LRE, we want them out in general education as much as possible. And it's also a testament to the special education instruction that they've received along the way, K-12. Or in this case, maybe K-11, because I took them as juniors. What's that? Pre-K, yes, sorry, pre-K. And then you'll see graduation rate of students with disabilities at 88%. And that may raise an eyebrow, excuse me. But keep in mind that, in a graduating class, there may be 35 students in special education, right? That's what that number is from, those 35 students. And of those 35, a couple of those students may not graduate. They may be going to the launch program. And they don't get their diploma until they're done with the launch program at 22. Then we get a diploma at that point. So that is reflective of why that number is 88% as opposed to 98% or 99%. Students will do other pathways depending on their particular needs. And then 11th and 12th graders enrolled in college and career readiness courses. Those are from AP courses, honors courses, to career and tech courses. So they're getting ready to go out and do what the next step will be for them in life, which is good. Downtown campus. 100% of the students coming out of there have a plan for what they're going to do next. The percent going out to 2 or 4 year colleges is 71% right now. Again, we've had 3 classes go through 3 groups of seniors, and that's even a little tricky in terms of data, because sometimes the student comes over their senior year and they haven't really been at downtown campus for 3 years, or they start there for their senior year, but then they transition back to the main campus because that's better for them at that particular point. But certainly a great deal of success for students leaving the downtown campus, going off to some fine schools. One student to the Job Corps, gap year, straight into the workforce. But all of the students had a plan when they leave. They left the downtown campus. And they work closely with their guidance counselors here at the high school to develop that plan. And they work closely with the staff at the downtown campus to develop that plan. And then lastly, launch. The barometer, the measure of success for launch students, one of them is, are they competitively employed when they're done with the launch program? And in many cases, we can say absolutely. We've had students competitively employed, earning a wage at those establishments and others in town. Multiple students over the course of time at each of those places. It's a testament to the program down there. Mr. Scott Craig does a terrific job with those students and really gets them to a point where they can be successful out there and productive members of the workforce. We're fortunate now, actually, at the Prospective Theater. It's been one of those things where we've wanted to break into in terms of getting students to work. We actually have 2 students who are currently at launch who are working at the Prospective Theater and earning a wage there, which is awesome. If you've never been to the Prospective Theater, go check it out. It's an amazing program they have there for students with disabilities. So, testament to the success of the program and the teachers and the work that they've done over the pre-K as well. That was special ed in less than an hour, at least.
Right.
Questions?
Thank you, Bill. I just want to begin by, we'll see if I'm sure there's questions and comments, but I just want to begin by saying thank you to all four of you for your tremendous efforts. I know it's challenging work on a normal day, but the last couple years have thrown some major curveballs at all of you, and your creativity and just all of the ways you've thought about continuing to support our students with their increasing and complex needs is greatly appreciated, and I know our students have benefited from your attention and support, so thank you. Questions, comments? Erica.
Thank you, first of all, because this is really helpful to understand all of the special education programs and how they all fit together. I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
Starting with all the way back at preschool again.
Oh, boy.
Can you talk a little bit about the capacity of the preschool to take however many children need to be served, right? Because the children that need to be, we have to serve them,
Right.
regardless of when they show up. And so can you talk a little bit about the current staff and the capacity, and are we close to capacity on the preschool?
So there are 4 classes, like I said, 2 3-year-olds and 2 4-year-olds. We look in terms of capacity for students, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong at any point along the way, but we look to cap them, in terms of total students, 12, 13, 14 preschool students becomes a lot of preschool students, right? And half of those are going to be typical, so let's say 6 typical and 6 students with special needs. The 4-year-olds, it's easier because we kind of know what's in the pipeline because they've been in the 3-year-old class in most cases. Sometimes they move into town and we bring those students in. So that's a little bit easier to know that, okay, I can take 12 typical peers in the preschool for 4-year-olds. 3-year-olds is a little trickier. We tend to start out with fewer typicals and special needs students just because we know we have to leave a little bit of headroom to grow as we move throughout the year. But if we got into a situation where, we were at 14 students in a 3-year-old class and not as many in the 4-year-old class, we could always take a student who's at the end of the 3-year-old and move them into the 4-year-old. There's ways that we can play around to accommodate the needs, so we would always be able to accommodate the needs of students who come to us.
Great. I had a question also about SACS in the high school, and you talked about the life skills program. For some of the kids who have less complex needs, that they still are engaged with the special education program, but they're mostly in general education and maybe occasional pullouts. What does that look like? I mean, I think it involves the writing center, but what does that look like?
Well, it would involve the services that the team determines at the PPT. So if a student just needs, at SACS or the high school, they need support with writing. Let's say they have a disability in the area of writing. The team may decide, well, that student needs direct instruction in writing, and we're going to do it, 4 days a week for a period of day. So built into the schedule at the high school, they would have a learning center course where they would go to the special ed teacher and get that instruction in writing skills. And then the rest of their day would be going to the general ed math, history, science, whatever it would be. So it would only come to a particular scheduled class as needed for that particular student. A lot of the intervention at SACS is done through the workshop class. So a lot of that intervention is done through that workshop period. But they would spend the vast majority of their time getting the general ed instruction. And all those services that I talked about on that slide that listed the plethora of services that we have are available to those students, and it's on an as-needed basis. Some students only need every other day of instruction, so it varies, but it's available to them as they need it.
Great. I also had a question for the downtown campus.
Sure.
Sounds like, it's been operating for a couple of years now. Can you talk about, if it didn't exist, where were those students going, and what's different for their experience now being at the downtown campus?
That's a great question. Some of those students, honestly, we'd be looking for another placement based on their needs. Some of those students would be struggling mightily here at the high school and kind of scratching and clawing their way through because it just wasn't the right setting. We would provide all the support and stuff we could do that we need to put in place, but for some students, this just isn't the right spot for them for one reason or another. But the downtown campus has afforded us the ability to meet the needs of a wide array of students here in district. And I think I've said to you before, I'm biased, but I think we do it better than sending them out to someplace else. We know those kids. They're here in their community, and we can provide the services that they need better than other places can.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered all your questions.
Yeah, no, that's
all your
great.
questions there. Sorry.
The other question I had was, you gave us the overall prevalence rate, but I was wondering if that's relatively consistent throughout the grades, or do you end up having fewer kids as they get older? And
It's actually
what does that look like?
It's actually the reverse. There are fewer kids younger, right? Because we really don't. Students are identified. Let me back up for a sec. I think the prevalence rate at the elementary level is around 9.8%. The prevalence rate at the high school is probably 13% or so, 14%, I think is the numbers. But you tend to have fewer students identified in elementary school because really, many students can make their way through kindergarten, first grade, second grade before red flags start to go off, say, oh, there might be something going on here. So it's towards the end of elementary school into SACS where we start to see more identification at times.
Is mental health also an aspect of that some of those needs?
Yeah, recently, yes. Yep,
more
for sure.
in high school?
Yep. But we are also seeing some elementary students who are having some challenges as well, behaviorally and with mental health.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to thank you and your entire team for the amazing work that you do. I mean, these are students who might fall through the cracks and not have the opportunities. I have a niece who's not here, but she had to have a special home program because she gets migraine headaches. And she just graduated and she's going to a competitive college, but for a special education program, I don't know where she would be. So it gives children who would not have opportunities, amazing opportunities, and it's just so important, I think, for them. The question I had, so thank you for everything you do for the students on all the levels. I had a question. I was sort of wondering about, who, even though we have this amazing support structure, who might be getting left behind, either through, the RTI or special education. And I was thinking about like the bright student who has a learning difference, not performing up to potential, but performing at an average, so you don't qualify for a special education. So what do we, because that can be a very frustrating experience too.
Sure.
And so I was wondering, what do we as a district do for those students?
And you're right, there are students who have disabilities. And part of the identification process for special education, you do an evaluation, you determine there's an evaluation, but you also have to ask the question, how does that disability impact the student's ability to access the curriculum? And if it doesn't, then they don't qualify for special education services. So if a student comes and they have attention deficit disorder, but they have straight A's across the board in advanced courses, well, it's not impacting your ability to access the general education curriculum. So you wouldn't qualify for special ed. You may have a 504 plan for different accommodations perhaps, but you wouldn't necessarily need specialized instruction. Those students who are excelling, they're performing at average, but they may have, higher ability. I think a lot of that comes down to working with classroom teachers and differentiation and trying to tap into what are that student's strengths and capitalizing on those strengths. There are programs, like ACES at the high school, the Writing Center at the high school, that can help tap into some of those skills for those students. But it's certainly something that, is a challenge to address. Sure.
Brendan.
I echo all the thanks. So the work that you do is absolutely amazing. We appreciate it. So as sort of following up on what Penny asked, over the years with the downtown campus and otherwise, we've been able to, bring more kids back in district and provide greater services. So, and I know we're trying to do that with the Literacy Academy, but I guess my question is, what's next? Are there other things that we can do? And then second question is there more that we can do to support you from a technology standpoint?
Where do you want to start? What's next? Yeah, that's a good question. I really think that, over the next couple of years, we're going to be feeling the effects of the pandemic. And we're going to see it a lot in terms of mental health, right? So from my perspective, we're going to be looking to continue to strengthen the skill set of the mental health team. We have the family community liaison that will help us with some of that. But strengthening that skill set so that we can meet the needs of these students. It would be, the downtown campus can deal with a lot, but it can't deal with all those needs. So looking to expand that in some way to help deal with some of those cases that are more significant would be one.
I'll just quickly add to think about what's next. We've been insourcing BCBAs as well. And I think that building that expertise on staff, having them on staff to train other staff members as well, helps us sort of to build the capacity across the entire department to service students. And we have an exciting opportunity at 220 where we're going, where we're going to be talking with the students and the staff about designing an entirely new space for the alternative program. And so that's a place where we can think about form and function and how can we design a classroom space specifically for students who would be the ones accessing the program at the downtown campus. So I think that's a true opportunity to do some really important and meaningful work in a way. Instead of having the students fit into the space, we create the space in order to support the programs for the kids.
Yep. And we'll get you a list of technology.
Okay.
Oh, and then there's the technology. Well, and on the technology, because I can't resist, truly, and we can maybe in the future have a presentation specifically about this, but it's not an overstatement to say the work that the department has done in the last 10 years with technology and special ed has been life-changing for students and families. To see students for the first time in their lives communicating with their parents, forming words through the device by touching the pictures and expressing interests or needs or wants or just thank you, really, really powerful. I mean, we've seen that firsthand happening for the very first time in kids' lives and parents' lives, and it's incredibly powerful. So what's next with that? We keep looking forward and pushing forward, and we're grateful that the district understands the importance of supporting those resources and providing those for our kids.
Absolutely.
Julie.
On the educational classifications page, what area have you seen increase the most since the pandemic?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say probably emotional disturbance, unfortunately. We used to be where we would have, when the state does the reporting, there would be an asterisk because there were so few students, we couldn't say how many the number of students. We've seen an increase there.
Yeah.
For sure. And probably other health impaired, around anxiety and depression and so forth.
That's kind of what I was expecting you
Yeah.
to answer. That would have been my guess. For those children or those students that have emotional disturbance, do you see lots of disruptions for the students that they're with? Are they disrupting the class?
No, it's not an outward
Okay.
presentation. It's more of an internalization of the emotion. So it's not somebody who's, I don't want you to get the impression that they're throwing desks around the room or doing these things like that. That's not what that is. So
More like anxiety, depression?
yeah, it's yeah. And there's a again, checklist, states and laws. There's a checklist we have to go through before we can identify a student as emotionally disturbed.
Right, it can manifest as school avoidance.
Sure.
Right, things like that.
Yep, variety of ways.
I have a question related to the theme that's, I think several have asked, but, particularly at the high school, but as we think about the role of the guidance counselor and these situational anxiety, depression, mental health, where you may have general ed students sort of crossing over into, needing special ed support, is the balance of our guidance counselors in terms of what they focus on, have you observed a shift in the time that they're spending? Or are they able to outreach to the school psychologists and to the BCBA and the other? I mean, how are we resourcing all of that and supporting those kids, whether they're identified as special ed or general ed?
There's certainly been an increase in the need for guidance counselors to work with students in terms of, around counseling per se, in terms of issues that come up in school. I think it was Dr. Bliss who said, they fight over text messages now or whatever, over whatever, Snapchat or something. I don't know. I'm a little out of touch there, sorry. But certainly the guidance counselors, they've seen an increased demand in their time, are focusing on, supporting students. But there is a close partnership with the clinical team, the psychologists and the social workers. And they certainly, if something comes to them where they feel someone else is better equipped to deal with it, they certainly refer them to, a psychologist or a social worker. And one of the things that we're really trying to pay close attention to is the connectedness that students feel here in school. One of the greatest indicators of mental health for students is whether or not they feel connected in the school. Is there something or someone that they connect to here in school? So Dr. Bliss and the team here at the high school, I know, are going down a list of students, all students. Who are they connected to? What are they connected with? Are they in this club, that club? Are they connect with this teacher or that teacher, whatever it is, to ensure that these students are feeling connected? And again, I think it's one of the things that's helped us manage the complexity of the mental health situation that we're seeing here and across the country.
Has the job market, has anything changed? Because I know we have openings and we may need more in the future in terms of supporting.
It's an incredibly competitive market right now. It's hard to get people.
Yeah.
Both social workers, psychologists, I'm sure guidance counselors, though I haven't looked for that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, unfortunately.
Shifting gears back to the preschool for a moment, are all of the students that are identified for the preschool special education through birth to 3? Is that state identified, or are the preschools in town also referring kids?
Preschools in town will refer students. If they're birth to 3, they'll refer them to, if they're 3 years or younger, they'll refer them to the birth to 3 program.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll also get direct referrals. We'll have preschools reach out and say, we're concerned about a student. Can you come take a look and evaluate the student? And we'll do evaluations for the preschool as well.
Okay. And then I had,
Okay.
All the way throughout, more of them at the 4-year-old level than the birth to 3 months, as Bill said in their work.
okay. And then one other question on the new state system. Based on what you've seen, do you think that it will adequately meet the needs and expectations of our district? I mean, I don't have a good understanding of how it's done now, but
No, it'll meet the needs. It'll do it. It's the information, the content that's in the new IEP is the same that's in the old IEP. It's how it's presented. Technology of the system is another issue. We'll see how that plays out. But in terms of the information, the goal is to make it more user-friendly for parents so that they can understand, here's the concern, here's the goal that we're addressing it, as opposed to here are all the concerns, and then here are all the goals. So it tries to make it much more logical and systematic in the approach for parents to be able to, understand it. Because it can be a 10-page document, it can be a 40-page document for a student, depending on their needs. So it can be quite complex. So the idea is to make it more understandable and user-friendly for parents.
Yeah, and speaking with some of my colleagues in the pilot districts, the IEP itself, the result of the new system, they feel is improved over the existing IEP. They think that it flows more naturally, and there's some different parts to it that are an improvement. The challenge is going to be the implementation and the timeline for implementation, because the product's still not completed, and yet they're talking about rolling over July 1. And anyone, if you've been in tech before and you know how rollouts work, it just doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And so we've all been encouraged by the state to run parallel systems, keep the system that you're using next year and use the pilot system as well, and sort of cut over to new IEPs with the new system while still maintaining the old, which, so again, if you've been in tech rollouts, that's not really how you do it. You have to live in the space to learn it in order to use it well. It's going to be tricky. Yeah. It's going to be mandated for all districts.
Yeah, we have to do it.
But we're communicating through CAPS and a few other districts at the state level to talk to the state about this rollout and to talk to them about just slowing it down so that districts have the opportunity to learn how to do this so we can do that cutover and do it successfully. Because it's also very, very high stakes. As Bill said, this is all governed by law and statute, special education in and of itself. So we want to make sure that it's done correctly for our kids' sake, for our family's sake, and everybody else. So there's a lot of conversation about this right now. They have been pretty consistent in answering that they're going forward with it. But every week that goes by that we haven't seen the product yet, I think moves us a little closer to that position changing, to be at least, phase in the rollout in a way that makes sense for all districts. If we have to do it, we'll be ready to do it. But right now I don't like the plan for the implementation. But at the end, I think the end result is going to be an improvement, as Bill said, where parents can log through a portal to see it online, to get right to it. There's a tighter connection between the objectives, the goals, the activities. There's lots of things in it that people who are piloting it say is an improvement. So we're looking forward to that. We just want to make sure that it's done in the right ways. Because as you know, a good idea, poorly implemented, is a bad idea.
Yeah. They think there's a shortage of special ed teachers now. Wait, if this comes through and it's a train wreck, it'll be a mass exodus. It won't just be Norwalk with a billboard on Route 8 looking for special ed teachers. Yeah.
Did you guys have input into the system?
Some, yes.
Yeah.
But minimal. There was a committee that was put together to put it together. Yeah. In theory, it'll be good. It's just getting from point A to point B.
Penny? Oh.
In terms of filling the positions that we have that are open, I know it's in competitive marketplace. Are the salaries that we're offering competitive, or are we losing out on the salary scale?
I think it depends on where they are in their career. If they are early on in their career, the differential between New Canaan and other communities isn't as great as you progress down the salary grid. It begins to become more substantial. So I've had teachers who live in Milford and say it's not worth it. I'm a second year. I'm only making this. I can make $2,000 less, but I'm not commuting from Milford to New Canaan. I haven't seen the new contract though.
Dan?
So I was just going to ask if some of the educational classifications can be kind of laid out over a longer time series for tracking. Mm-hmm. And it might not be possible because I'm sure kids move up and down the spectrum, but also if there were some numbers around where in the least restrictive environment that was. Because I think to look at that data over time and what's increasing, what's decreasing might actually be helpful for both understanding this and as well as I'm thinking like into next budget season and just understanding where there might be some fluctuations.
Sure.
I don't know if that's possible.
It's possible. There is some, a student, when we pick a category of classification, we pick the category that best represents where the student is at that point. So it may be where there's a student struggling with reading, but we're not saying that they're learning disabled because the attention deficit disorder that they also have is having the primary impact on why they're not picking up on the phonics because they can't concentrate on what's going on for longer than 5 minutes at a clip. That may change over time. So that student who was OHI 3 years from now, we may shift that classification to LD because that's what more accurately reflects that person. So the data might be a little soft in nature, but we can put it together.
Bill?
Yeah, two quick questions, one micro, one macro. On the micro, in terms of the preschool, do we incentivize non-special ed families to send their kids to preschool with the special ed kids?
We don't have to. We have a waiting list. So Bob could tell you that he gets calls all the time for families wanting to send their kids to our preschool.
That's great.
Yeah, which is awesome. It wasn't always that way historically. There was a time where we were beating the bushes to try and find kids to come. But now it's the reverse. We have quite a long waiting list at this point.
Right. And the second one, in terms of the NCPS versus the state and the prevalence rates, I actually would have thought that the spread would be a little bit wider there. It looks like it's about 3, sometimes 4 percentage points. Certainly not implying that we're not doing a good job. It sounds like we're doing a great job, but Are other schools in the state like, are they not diagnosing their kids to the same level that we are? Are they cooking the books? I mean, I just would have thought, us versus some of these urban districts, I would have thought the spread would be bigger.
No, the urban districts are the ones on the outside edge of that, if it's, the state was 16.3, whatever it was, I don't have it in front of me now. Urban district maybe around 19%.
Okay.
But then, we're at 12, Weston's at 12, other districts are, lower, so, it's reflective of what's in the community, the needs of the community.
All right.
All right.
This was a very informative presentation. Thank you.
For your time.
Thank you all for being here tonight. All right. We have a budget update. The budget season has concluded.
And there's the update.
Well, some news.
It's about that quick, but it is. So at the town council meeting just before the break, they did approve the budget as it was moved forward from the Board of Finance. So we had a couple of extra, a couple of meetings, a couple of nights where some dialogue back and forth. But at the end of the day, we're very grateful, certainly to the Board of Ed, for your support, and thank you for coming out and logging on. Seeing the names pop up on the screen, all those things, so thank you for being there. But do also just want to say thank you to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Town Council, everybody for working together on behalf of our students, our parents, and the staff and the district, to really process and discuss and think through the budget, and at the end of the day, to adopt it and move it forward. We feel very good. We all feel very good about this budget. Feel that it does appropriately resource all of our strategic priorities. I think it does so in a very responsible way. The capital budget was also approved. Now, we've had some conversation. They didn't necessarily vote on the capital budget, but what they're saying is that it's all being bonded, and so they've adopted it, and then the bonding resolution will be crafted by the Board of Finance, if not this week, sometime next. But Joanne did speak directly with Ann at the town, and she said that the capital budget is moving forward. So we'll stay tuned with that. It's a little different than I remember from years past. But in speaking with Ann and Josh over there, both who are new, they said they looked through past agendas and they're confident that this is the right process to follow to move the capital budget forward as well. So we're going to follow that cue. And again, keep an eye on it and stay in communication with them. And if anything changes, let you know. But we don't expect it to. I mean, all of this was really, the conversations went very well. It was all done in very good faith. And it really was although it feels like a long one because an extra week, it was a very productive, I think, and positive budget process going through all of it this year. And again, it was constructive in working together with the different boards along the way. So with the capital budget being approved, then we feel good going forward on Wednesday day, 12 and 4, for our planetarium demos. Sorry, and invitations have gone out for that, and thank you for your feedback around there. And as you know, that the capital budget will support some of that, and we're looking to fundraise the difference there. So we're looking forward to those demos on Wednesday. But for the budget itself, the next conversation we'll have about the 22-23 budget will be kind of those final allocations bringing before the board for adoption. Not much has to change because the budget moved through consistently where it was. We will be talking with the Board of Finance as we go through and get a new projection on our insurance just for that allocation to know if that number has to change up or down based on our experience.
And I just wanted to echo a few things that you said. I do want to acknowledge the Board of Finance and the Town Council and the Board of Selectmen as well. They were very good partners throughout the season and really took the time to understand, the challenges and what the drivers were of our budget early on in the season, so we could initiate those conversations and really think about solutions and ways we could partner to find, savings and to think about the process for insurance, the internal services fund. So I thought that was very productive, and I just want to thank Todd Lavieri, Chairman of the Board of Finance, and Steve Carl and the Town Council, as well as the liaisons that serve to the Board of Education on both those committees. They, went to extra meetings, they came to our resources meetings, they asked good questions, and they stayed engaged throughout the process, and I think it it was a very positive season, and it was just great to be back in front of them, presenting and face-to-face with them. So I just want to acknowledge that in addition. Thank you. All right. I don't think we have comments from the public. So we'll move right into announcements and future business.
Sure, just a couple of brief announcements. One, we received notification today that all 5 of our kitchens in the schools were recently reviewed by the health department inspection, and of our 5 schools, 3 of them received 100s and 2 received 98s, and the 2 that received 98s, it was because of a faulty mixing valve, and the temperature of the water was just a little bit off. So we've ordered those new valves, and all 5 will be 100. So I wanted to congratulate and say thanks to Michelle Santilli and her staff in the cafeterias, doing a great job. Also, just to briefly share that we've met with the architect last week, and we also went over and visited a couple of times to 220 Elm, and we're starting to plan out that move for the Board of Education. We can't do anything specifically or formally until the tenants that are in there now move out, but they do say that they're on track to move out the end of July. So our goal is to have the plans all drawn up, to have the bids all set, and be ready to go the day they're gone, so we can start doing the demo and the reconstruction to create the space for the alternative center, for the launch program, and of course for all the central office spaces. So those wheels are turning, and that's underway.
And what was the anticipated move-in date?
So we're looking at the start of '23.
Okay.
So if we can get in there the very beginning of August, I think we should have some time to do that. We have until March if we need it, over at 39 Locust, because we gave them notification March 1st for the 1-year notification. But there's going to be some swing there because the PD is looking to move into Locust when we leave in order to, they'll occupy that while their space is being renovated. So at least there's some conversation about that at least. I know they've been talking to the landlord about it. So when our space is ready, it's a little more flexible, I think, for us, and we'll be able to do that. So that's the goal, and the cabinet team has been meeting with the architect, and they're going to be coming in the next couple of days to meet with the program leads at the Alternative Center, talk to some kids who are in the downtown campus, talk to our launch teachers and others, and help them to plan out what that space will look like based on the program needs and kind of goals for that work. So it's exciting. It'll be good. So we'll give updates along the way as that unfolds. And at our next meeting, we'll have a statement of accounts. We didn't do it tonight because of the week off. We just didn't have a chance for resources to meet, so we'll have it come before the resources committee first. There's no transfers, but still, it's just best practice for us to always have it go to resources before coming to the full board. So we'll do that. We'll have a health update with Jonathan Adams and a brief overview of the summer programs as well. As you know, we have sort of a portfolio of summer programs now, and there's been some questions about those. So we'll provide the board with a brief update about all of that. Hopefully, the storm tonight doesn't cause too many power outages in town or across the state, and that there's no problem with school. But doesn't hurt to have your phone near the bed tonight, just in case you get an alert that one of the schools is out of power or something else. So we're going to hope for the best, but be prepared.
All right, 4 a.m. call.
Yeah,
Hopefully not.
4 a.m. call. I thought we were done with those too. Okay.
All right, thanks for the update.
Sure.
All right, with that, motion to adjourn. Brendan, second. Bob, all in favor? All right, good night, everyone. Stay dry.